You'll now be cross-examined by Ms. Higgins, who is counsel for Mr. Cermak.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honour.
Please proceed.
Mr. Berikoff, I'm going to be asking you some questions on behalf of Mr. Cermak. Do you understand?
Yes, I understand, ma'am.
Now, just so that I can be clear about your function and your job, I'm going to start there, if I may. You describe yourself, and we've heard, that you were a UN military information officer, correct?
That's correct.
So effectively you were involved in assessing who was doing what, where in Sector South.
That would have been my initial job, yes.
And we know from the third statement that you made that you were tasked by General Forand on numerous occasions to get as much information as possible about the situation in the Kraina and Sector South in particular. Is that right?
That's correct.
Now, I note that your specialisation is being a military intelligence officer.
Yes, the terminology military information officer, at that time, the United Nations did not use that terminology, did not use the terminology intelligence officer. They rather used information officer, and that is what I was. And yes, I was an intelligence officer.
Now, just so that I understand and the court understands, if you could indulge me by explaining very briefly and simply the difference between information and intelligence.
Information is raw material, whereas intelligence is assessed material of the information, of the raw information that you gain throughout the sector or wherever.
And would I be right in saying that there are largely two sources? First is the human source, or the two-legged source, as it's often referred to. And the second is, of course, the documentary sources.
That's two of the sources. There's a number of other sources as well, ma'am.
What would those be?
There's satellite, there's imagery, overhead imagery, there's electronic information that you can receive, various means of eavesdropping, etc. So there's a variety of sources, ma'am.
And part of being an information officer would presumably also involve you talking to people on the ground, particularly in an unfamiliar territory.
That's correct.
Now, I'd like to move on straight away, please, to information that you gathered and had in respect of Mr. Cermak. Can I ask you this first of all? Before Mr. Cermak came to Kneen, were you aware that he was a successful businessman operating in civilian life?
Prior to his arrival, no, I did not know anything about Mr. Cermak. Following his arrival in the Kneen area, I then learned that, in fact, he was in the petrol business in Croatia.
And did you know that he was appointed by President Tudjman to his position in Kneen on the 5th?
I had learned that during the day of the 5th of August, yes.
Would I be right in saying, to be fair to you, that there was no pre-deployment briefing as to who Mr. Cermak was before you arrived in Kneen?
No, you're correct in saying that, ma'am. There was not any, General Cermak was not mentioned at all.
And it would also be right, wouldn't it, to say that you never had a one-on-one meeting with Mr. Cermak?
Personally, I did not know. However, I attended a meeting and I escorted him around the compound with the refugees, but I did not have a one-to-one with General Cermak.
I'll come on a little bit later to the meeting. But if I could just move on to say this, or to ask you this, would it be fair to suggest that there was perhaps an element of confusion among members of the UN in Kneen as to who Mr. Cermak was?
When General Cermak first got appointed to the position, yes, there was, I won't say it was confusion, but he was an unknown entity, and the name was not recognized by the majority of the people in the compound.
Now, as an unknown entity, and given your role as a UN information officer, did you ever seek to make a request to go and speak with Mr. Cermak himself to find out more about who he was?
That would not have been my job to do that. However, if I was tasked to do that, I probably would have. Did I? The answer is no, ma'am.
Thank you. I'd like to now move on to ask you about various titles that you have ascribed to Mr. Cermak. The first title, I'm going to move in sequence, and I'm going to take your first statement that you made in 1996 so that you have it in mind, Ms. Berikoff.
No problem, ma'am.
The first title we have is in fact Mayor. Do you remember referring to that when you reviewed your statements?
Yes, I do. There were a number of titles given to General Cermak,
Well,
and Mayor was one, yes.
Yes. Can you tell me, please, first of all, and we'll move through those titles, but first of all, could you help me with the source of the information, please, for the title of Mayor?
The source of the information would have been through our operations center, who in all likelihood got it from the senior management, be it Colonel Timchuk, General Leslie, or General Furan.
You say it would have been through the operational center. I'm going to ask you a very simple question which you may be able to answer yes or no, and it's this. Can you tell me the name of any individual who referred to him as Mayor?
No, I cannot, other than our own managerial staff.
Now, did you come to know that he wasn't in fact the Mayor as one hadn't been appointed?
I was not aware of that, ma'am.
Did you know that there was a government's commissioner in the area?
I was not aware of that.
Had you heard of the name of Mr. Peter Passage?
I am not aware of that name, ma'am.
As an information officer, Mr. Berikoff, did you ever compile a list of people's names and or job functions in relation to the civilian police, the military police, or the army?
I personally did not compile the name. However, I provided names to the operations staff, and they in turn compiled the list, I believe.
So the answer is no.
The answer is no, I did not, ma'am. I only
you.
provided information.